Football at Slack by Ted Hughes is a very relatable kind of normal poem, I think, for Hughes. Some of his poems are really odd and difficult to figure out. This one is quite a straightforward one, so we're not going to spend too long on it in this lesson, I think, because you'll probably get it and understand it reasonably well from the offset. Most people I know that are sort of, into poetry and also sort of sporty or into football really like this poem, so it might be one of the ones that you personally really enjoy or connect with if you're doing like a whole collection of Hughes poems. So there's quite a lot of difficult vocab. Don't let that perturb you. Don't let it worry you, because the poem itself is reasonably straightforward for a Hughes poem, but you might want to take a minute just to sort of look through this vocab and make sure you understand what all these words mean. And then also, I want you to just read the poem aloud to yourself. So it's in copyright, so I can't read it here for you. So yeah, just pause me and read the poem aloud, and then we'll carry on with the interpretation. So there's a little summary of the story here. It's a narrative poem, so it's got a full story to it. There's a bare patch of hilly grassland between two valleys, so it's kind of a countryside setting, and there's just some men wearing bright colours bouncing around, and the ball that they're kicking around bounces in the wind. The ball flies up, and the men try to head it. They try to a header, if you're not used to football, is where you hit the ball with your head. Someone kicks the ball downhill, and then people run after it. The ball jumps up and hangs in the wind, and it looks like it might blow away. They all shout together, and the ball falls back towards them. And then there's a burst of wind that kind of goes through the gaps in the clouds and makes them sort of feel awe from this mixture of light and darkness that looks like a painting. Heavy rain falls down and it presses on them. Their hair gets stuck to the skin, they're kind of covered in water, and they shout out. They're kind of tired, washed, clean, happy. So there's this very, what we call pastoral imagery. Pastoral is where you talk about the countryside, basically. Pastoral poetry or pastoral literature depicts the beauty of this kind of like natural country living where people live in harmony with nature. So the hills around them turned into mire. They kind of turn into a bog because they're all wet from the rain, and the landscape turns blue and it looks different. There's this Atlantic air that brings rainy weather. So I don't know if you've ever been in a natural landscape similar to this, but if you've ever been in Wales, this type of nature that you see kind of happens a lot in Wales. It also happens a lot in the Lake District, where you've got this kind of really sunny moment and all these hills surrounding you, and then suddenly a cloud will pass over the sun and it'll be a dark kind of shadow. All of the hills will go from bright green to blue really quickly, and then there'll be like a shower of rain. And usually you have to run away, run inside, or put an umbrella up or something. But yeah, certain parts of England and also landscapes in other countries as well, but it is particular to the English or British countryside. Like I've seen it happen in Wales as well. Not so much in Scotland, where I've been in Scotland, but yeah, Welsh. It reminds me of like Welsh landscape, or maybe Lake District kind of style landscape, that type of thing. So yeah, they keep carrying on playing through all of this kind of weather, and then the golden sun sweeps away the dark and rainy mood. It peeks through the clouds like it was watching them. It's a very beautiful kind of image of the way that sport can be very natural and pleasurable, and there's something about the kind of interaction of the emotions and kind of energy of watching this football match mirrors the sort of strange energy of the landscape as it's switching quickly from sunshine to rain and back again. So it's very, very beautiful, I think. I mean, it's a very simple thing, watching people play football on a field. I used to do it all the time because my dad, for some reason, decided he would be the manager of like a teenage boys football club. I have no idea why he decided this, but it meant that every Saturday I had to go to that house and just stand around while he taught boys to play football, and I'd watch them playing because as a girl I wasn't allowed to join in. My brother would go. So yeah, as a sort of English person, also a Yorkshire person, which is Ted Hughes is also from Yorkshire, so he's from the same part of England as me. And yeah, it's a very common pastime, as you're growing up in school and so on, in this part of the world to experience that. But yeah, it's interesting because when I was bored and watching lots and lots of football matches, I was kind of just like not really paying attention to the weather or the beauty of nature, or being the fact that you're outdoors in the sun and the rain and so on. But yeah, there's something kind of more epic, I suppose, or more powerful about watching sport if you're kind of connecting it to the wider weather that's at hand. So it's an amateur football match. It's not a serious football match. Obviously, if you are into football, you know that serious football matches are played in stadiums and they're a lot more controlled. This is not a giant match. It's just a kind of small, fun match between, probably friends, people who are kind of friendly with one another. So yeah, there's this kind of rich imagery going on that describes the football players. Sometimes in this document it will say football and sometimes soccer. That's because the different people that are studying this poem might live in different places in the world, and in England and the rest of the UK we say football, but yeah, a lot of people call it soccer, and then American football is a different thing, for example. So football, soccer is basically what we're doing here. So yeah, it's really interesting. It's like this enjoyment of the match and the act of playing the sport, even though there's a lot of things that are actually quite annoying or difficult about this match. They're not really perturbed or put off by the fact that it starts raining. That somehow adds to the enjoyment of it. It changes the energy of the game, and it changes the sort of spirits of the people playing the game, so it makes it more interesting and varied. It's almost like they're working alongside nature. It's not that oh no, it rains and we just wanted to play. They're not grumpy about it. They sort of incorporate the change in weather into their sport, as if it's like an artistic skill almost that they're doing that. So yeah, there's not really like anything kind of negative going on the speaker's point of view, even though the weather itself could be perceived as switching between positive and negative. So there's sort of like, I don't know, glowing positivity in the depiction of sport here, the way that it's portrayed as like the camaraderie and the morale of the players doesn't go down, even if there are things that mean that their sport gets harder to do, or their game is harder to play. So yeah, we're sort of, as readers of this poem, we're kind of caught up with that feeling as well, that kind of like admiration and sort of joy that these men sort of still keep going against the odds, which is part of the pleasure of watching sports matches and sports games. So yeah, there's also this sense of like a painterliness with which the speaker imagines or depicts this scene. It's very, very visual. It's very, it's almost rendered in as much detail as you would render a painting, I think. Like you should be able, when you read the poem aloud to yourself, to imagine all of the scenery really clearly and the ball clearly. So yeah, it's quite beautiful and quite kind of like uplifting as a poem. There's a lot of techniques here. I'm not going to go too detailed into these in the lesson itself. Feel free to pause and look through. You can also download this document from scribbly.com if you want a physical copy of the document. And yeah, there's quite a lot of precise language going on here. So feel free to look through these notes in detail. Also, think about the structure. So when you analyze a poem, it's really important to get a balance between the poetic devices and the structural features and the form. So instead of just doing the language, you're actually thinking about the shape of the poem or the length of the lines or the punctuation or that kind of thing. So think about the dashes when he's describing the ball. That's quite an easy one to start with if you want to analyze the structure. And then think about the overall shape of the poem. It's free verse, so why has he made it like that? Why is it not in a regular, rigid structure? Why did he choose to make the poem kind of fluid and irregular and chaotic? So yeah, we're going to whiz through that stuff, but do feel free to look more deeply into it. If you're analysing this poem for an essay or an exam, then you definitely need all of that stuff in detail. So spend time on the language features, the structure and the form. So we're going to jump into context now, which is the background for the poem. So yeah, a lot of people who are critics of Ted Hughes, they think the setting for this is Calderdale, West Yorkshire. Look up some nice images of that one. It's all of Yorkshire is so beautiful. I live in Yorkshire at the moment, and it's just like amazing. So nice around here. I mean, I'm from Yorkshire. People from Yorkshire are very biased and very protective of Yorkshire and how good it is, but you can tell from the descriptive imagery that the pleasure of the game is kind of matched against the beauty of the environment and the appreciation for the nature that these men are surrounded by. I think also it's a nostalgic poem. So it's nostalgia is where you feel like you kind of have this glowing memory of the past where you sort of miss it and you're kind of sad because you can't really recapture it in the time of your life you're in now. And yeah, because Hughes wrote this poem and he published this poem at least in 1979. He's middle-aged, so he's not a young man playing football. It feels like this is a memory from his past, like a really important, powerful memory that he felt like stuck with him, or maybe an experience that he had in his present jogged this memory, and he suddenly thought back to this point where he was playing football or watching people play football. So it feels like it's a reminiscent poem about memories of the past and how sometimes in your head you have those really beautiful, perfect memories where something really profound or sublime happens to you and it just sticks with you. So watching these men play football in all of the different weathers that were happening, and the fact that their spirits were never dampened by that change in weather. Something about that stuck with him for many, many years, and he revisited that memory and put it into a poem many years later. So it feels like maybe it's a childhood event, or maybe it's an event that he experienced when he was a much younger man. There's also, an interesting kind of side note as context, which is something, if you're interested in the history of football or you like football, you could put into your analysis of this poem. Is in the late 1970s when the poem was published, football had a kind of bad press, really. Like people were quite worried about the sport because of hooligans who are like football fans that really ruin it for everyone else. They get very drunk, they're very loud. I mean, I live near a football ground now, and I used to live right next to one, and I also actually used to work at a football ground when I was a teenager because my mum made me for a bit, and it's horrible because I had to deal with hooligans. And hooligans are people who, they get very drunk, they get very loud, they use sport as a way to just get rid of some of their anger and their stress, I think, from the week. But it all just kind of builds up and becomes like quite a violent thing in their head. So they might be disruptive, they might physically destroy things or get into fights with people who are supporting the opposite team. So there's a real different side to football that was in the media at the time that this poem was published. So it might also be a bit of a defense, like a socio-political defense of the true spirit of football, which Ted Hughes feels is not hooliganism. It's this camaraderie, this kind of like feeling of everyone working together. Because there's a sense that, you know, both sides are really enjoying that game. It's not like about who wins, which colour loses. It's about the act of playing the sport itself, and that sense of sportsmanship. So sportsmanship is a really important theme in this poem. Make sure you understand what that means, and you have your own ideas and interpretations of how this poem shows sportsmanship. So yeah, interesting kind of context of what's going on in the 70s as well. So there's quite a lot of beliefs here, quite important attitudes really, even though it's quite a light, fun poem. Pastoral poetry. So pastoral, again, you can kind of look into this in more detail, but it's Pastoral. The pastoral genre usually depicts very light-hearted scenes, almost comically, and the pastoral characters are always kind of, nothing really serious happens to them in their lives, nothing really bad happens, nothing goes wrong. So pastoral poetry has always got this kind of lightness and fun energy to it, and also this kind of beauty and simplicity to it. So this is an extremely pastoral poem, which means that it's kind of fun and light and sort of silly, but also it does have an important message that, you know, about sports and the power that sports have socially to connect people together, and also the sort of connection of humans to the natural environment and the pleasure of experiencing nature in all of its different kind of changing moods. So yeah, nature's a powerful force in the poem that has to be respected and sort of listened to, because it, you know, it really impedes on their game. But at the same time, it should be appreciated and enjoyed in all of its forms. And there's also a sense of, you know, enjoy the moment, whatever it brings. If you're trying really hard to do something or enjoy something and suddenly it starts raining, or the equivalent symbolically of rain happens, where like something gets in the way or something unexpected happens, you can still kind of keep your spirit like light, and you can still keep going through that moment. You don't have to let things that happen to you randomly bring you down or stop you from enjoying something. So that is a really important core message in the poem that will help you analyze it deeper if you kind of get to the heart of that message. So yeah, have fun regardless of what happens. Nice little poem. Some of Hughes's poems are very dark or very gloomy, so you should be feeling quite relieved by this one, because it's such a nice, happy, joyous poem. Like there's nothing really that dark about it at all. So when you're ready, you can try some of these tasks and exercises, and then pick 1 or 2 essay questions to plan and write as well. But yeah, hopefully you find this poem quite fun. And like I said, it's quite a simple, easy poem. So you should all be feeling quite confident on it now. So yeah, thank you for listening. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this one. And I'll see you guys soon in a future lesson. Go to scribbly.com if you want to download this, or go through more lessons with the Ted Hughes content. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys soon.